From full-on SpongeBob psychological break to a very worrying case of procrastination, we're counting down the times SpongeBob has lost his mind. We're kicking off our list with Squid's Visit, an episode where SpongeBob is so unhinged he creates a far too detailed replica of Squidward's entire house. The episode kicks off with Squidward just about to head home after another boring shift at the Krusty Krab, ready to enjoy a nice Squidward-style night in. But SpongeBob's begging him to come over. You know, the one thing that would ruin a nice Squidward-style night in. Squidward's like, hell no. Even calling SpongeBob's place a dirty little hovel. But SpongeBob's determined and he won't take no for an answer. Patrick, the genius he is, suggests SpongeBob borrow something of Squidward's to lure him over. And SpongeBob's like, bingo, great idea. So while Squidward's cooking dinner, SpongeBob sneaks in and snatches Squidward's vacuum cleaner. Mission accomplished. Squidward has no choice but to head over to SpongeBob's place to get it back. But when Squidward gets there, he's in for a horrifying shock. SpongeBob has built an exact replica of Squidward's house. I mean, what the hell is going on here? We're not even talking like a little tribute. We're talking down to every single little detail. The chair, the coffee table, the pillow his mom made for him. Squidward's just staring in horror as he realizes SpongeBob has somehow copied every single inch of his life, even the tiniest chip in a painting from when Squidward first moved in. It's maybe the most insane thing that SpongeBob has ever done. Things get even weirder when Squidward heads to the bathroom and finds his medicine cabinet complete with his rash cream. What? SpongeBob is a stalker at this point, man. Then SpongeBob pops up out of nowhere, causing Squidward to scream, slip on his own rash cream, and smack his head into the toilet, knocking him out. When he comes to, Squidward thinks he's had a nightmare, until he sees SpongeBob still staring at him with that honestly psychotic welcome to your own house look. Horrified, he tries to escape, making a beeline for his vacuum cleaner, but the madness isn't over. He finds it stashed in a closet, but it's stuck. He yanks it out only for the thing to smack him in the face, send him crashing into the wall, and knock all 492 of his self-portraits off kilter. Oh boy, so now we have his OCD being triggered too. SpongeBob is unhinged. He finally stumbles out of SpongeBob's, but that's when the real bombshell drops. His own house is on fire. Turns out he forgot the casserole he was cooking, and now his place has burnt to the ground. SpongeBob, of course, just casually offers for Squidward to stay with him, and that's the last straw. Squidward goes catatonic. He ends up crashing at SpongeBob's place, completely out of it, while SpongeBob and Gary sleep outside, which is probably the best place for them after all of this mess. Still, at least they can put all of this behind them and move on to something else. SpongeBob wishes he could do that in our next episode, Procrastination, which sends him into a dangerous psychological spiral.
Everyone must write an essay on what not to do at a stoplight.
SpongeBob is assigned an 800-word essay on what not to do at a stoplight, due the next day. And of course, he's psyched to get started. Classic SpongeBob enthusiasm. But the second he sits down at home, ready to crank it out, his brain turns to mush. No idea what to write, and suddenly, everything else seems way more interesting. I'm sure every writer can relate to that one. You guys are pretty crazy too. Naturally, he gets sidetracked. His friends are outside having a blast, so he's feeling a little FOMO. Then, like a total master of procrastination, he spends hours doing anything but writing. He does push-ups, feeds Gary, even cleans his kitchen for crying out loud. That's when you know you're desperate. Every 5 seconds, he takes another break to do some useless thing, just dancing around the essay. Okay, at this point, I'm starting to think that I'm as psychotic as SpongeBob, and I don't know how to feel about that. Even Patrick, of all people, points out that he's avoiding the damn thing when SpongeBob calls him in the middle of the night just to chat. It only gets crazier from there. SpongeBob's down to deciding on the perfect sandwich bread when the mailman knocks on the door, thinking, aha, another excuse not to write. He tries to chat with the guy, but the mailman's like, don't you have an essay to write? Suspicious, right? Also, mind your own damn business, mail guy. Who asked you? So, SpongeBob heads back inside only to start seeing things. Now it's like everything in his house has turned against him. The TV newscaster is reporting on his unfinished essay. His furniture starts talking. And somehow he even ends up locked outside with no pants. Meanwhile, a living candle sets his paper on fire, and his entire house, somehow sentient, is yelling at him to stop wasting time! So yeah, I think it's fair to say that he might not be in the best frame of mind. Suddenly, SpongeBob snaps out of it, realizing he's in a nightmare, but it's almost too late. There's only 5 minutes left before class. In pure panic mode, it hits him. All this wasted time counts as things not to do at a stoplight. So he scribbles down everything he's done, hitting that 800-word mark right before the deadline, which I would argue is a total cheat, but also a pretty great loophole for what is a dumb essay question, honestly. Finally, he bolts to school, essay in hand, only to find out from Mrs. Puff that she canceled the assignment because of a teacher's convention. Huh? Instead, she's planning a field trip to an actual stoplight next week. Huh? What kind of class is this? SpongeBob just freezes, that big fake grin locked on his face. Then he snaps, ripping his essay to shreds before basically splitting himself in half in frustration. Does that count as unaliving himself? I mean, oof. We're just gonna assume SpongeBob is alive, purely because it'll make this next episode completely deranged. To Love a Patty is one of the most inexplicably weird episodes of SpongeBob you'll ever see. SpongeBob is in love with a burger. Yeah.
Mr. Krabs, Squidward, allow me to introduce my date, Patty.
Your date's a Krabby Patty?
Alright, so SpongeBob's flippin' patties at the Krusty Krab like any other day when he suddenly decides he's in love with one of his own burgers. I don't even know where to start with this one, bro. He names it Patty and starts treating it like his soulmate. The customers are chomping down on all the other Krabby Patties, but SpongeBob's like, "Oh no, not my precious Patty." So he literally snatches it off someone's plate and swaps it with a burger that's got his shoe on it. Horrible customer service. But get this, the customer still eats it and loves it, which, when you really think about it, is not a compliment to his cooking or the Krusty Krab's burgers. So now he's got a patty tucked under his arm like he's on some bizarre date, and he heads home with her. Now, I should say, don't worry, it's not going where you think it's going. Patrick and Sandy come over, hoping for their usual hangout time, but SpongeBob's all, "Sorry, folks, I'm busy with Patty." Poor Patrick's crushed. Dude's got ditched for a rotting burger. Because yes, she is rotting pretty fast. Meanwhile, SpongeBob's taking Patty everywhere, singing about how they're soulmates while going to the carnival, stuffing their faces with cotton candy, hitting the beach, all while he's ignoring that Patty is just sitting there getting soggier by the minute. It's romantic if you can overlook the idea of how bad it smells. He really has gone insane. Then, in a truly deranged moment, some clams try to nibble on Patty, and SpongeBob straight up murders 21 clams to protect her. Finally, he takes Patty on a little riverboat ride, and she falls apart in the water. Does SpongeBob take the hint? Nope. He just reassembles her soggy, nasty self and keeps going like nothing's wrong. Gross. 6 hours later, he's still dragging Patty around, but she's full-on rotting at this point. Unfazed, he takes her to the Krusty Krab for a romantic dinner, and Mr. Krabs is thinking, "Whoa, SpongeBob's dating some rich girl." But then he realizes, nope, it's just a moldy patty stinking up the whole restaurant and scaring off customers. Okay, well, finally somebody is going to do something to snap him out of this. Squidward tries to set him straight, but SpongeBob's still lost in delusion until he finally catches a whiff of Patty's rotting self. Reality hits. She's gross, she's decayed, and she's barely a patty anymore. Why he didn't notice that before, I have no idea. Mr. Krabs finally gives him the pep talk.
Krabby Patties are meant to be loved and eaten.
So SpongeBob, realizing he's got to put his love out of its misery, takes a reluctant bite, feeling like he's eating his own heartbreak. At this point, I'm not sure what the message of this episode is. Eat your loved ones? He's totally nauseous, but asks Mr. Krabs for a doggy bag at the end, proving he's still the weirdest sponge in the sea. And I'll be honest, I can't promise to know what he's gonna do with those remains at home. I guess sometimes we all lose our minds and fall in love with some rancid meat. At least we can recover with good medical treatment, assuming that the right person gets injected, which is not guaranteed in Bikini Bottom. I was a teenage Gary.
Good job, Gary. I love you, Gary.
The episode starts with Patrick showing up to tell SpongeBob about his jellyfishing convention. Great news for SpongeBob, right? Wrong. He can't bring Gary along, so he'll have to miss out on all the fun. Or he can do the stupidest thing imaginable. So he ropes Squidward into snail sitting, giving him the whole just feed him twice a day spiel. Squidward agrees just to get SpongeBob and Patrick the hell out of there, then parks himself outside for a chill weekend, totally ignoring Gary. Meanwhile, poor Gary's inside, starving and sad, watching the door like he's in some tragic snail soap opera. Fast forward to when SpongeBob finally comes home and Squidward's like, "Oh crap, Gary!" He finds the poor snail practically on death's door. So now he's scrambling, trying to shove food at Gary, who's just lying limp, too weak to eat. SpongeBob's about to walk in, so Squidward panics, shoves a bunch of Gary's food into his own mouth, and greets SpongeBob like he hasn't just spent 3 days neglecting the most beloved living creature in SpongeBob's life. Now, why he thinks he'll get away with this, I have no idea. So Gary drags himself out, looking like he's got one foot in the grave, and SpongeBob goes nuts, calling the vet ASAP. The vet leaves SpongeBob with a syringe of snail plasma, saying he's too squeamish to do the shot, which, okay, sketchy vet vibes. So SpongeBob, freaked out, begs Squidward to do it. Seriously, SpongeBob? You can't do this one thing for your pet? But every time Squidward tries, SpongeBob's too busy clutching Gary, flailing around until Squidward just ends up jabbing SpongeBob with the plasma by mistake. Not that Squidward cares. He brushes it off, telling SpongeBob he'll be fine. Except he's not. Pretty soon, SpongeBob's acting weird. Well, weirder. Eating Gary's food, losing his limbs, meowing, the whole shebang. He's in full-on snail mode. Now he's over at Squidward's begging for help, and Squidward's freaking out, barricading his house like SpongeBob's some kind of demon. He realizes he messed up big time, but it's too late. Now SpongeBob's chasing him, meowing for help, and Squidward's scrambling around, accidentally injecting himself with the plasma in the process. Yep, he's a snail too now. It just keeps getting better. Now it's Squidward, SpongeBob, and Gary sitting on a fence, howling out a meowing tune. Patrick wakes up and yells at them to shut up, throwing a boot at Squidward's head, but the three keep singing. I mean, what else can they do? They're snails now, and all of Bikini Bottom just has to live with that. In fact, Bikini Bottom has to live with a lot of miserable stuff. Like this monobrowed kook, for one. Sometimes when Squilliam comes back, SpongeBob ends up paying the price, mentally. It's Squilliam Returns. So
His name? What's his name? I got nothing on a name. Come on, baby, what's the name? We threw out his name!
So Squidward's just trying to get through his lunch break when, bam, he runs into Squilliam, his rich, smug, glory hog of a rival from high school who starts grilling him about his accomplishments. But you know, he has none. Squidward, sweating bullets and panicking, blurts out the first ridiculous thing he can think of, that he owns a 5-star restaurant. You really couldn't think of anything simpler? Squilliam bites, saying he'll bring his whole crowd over that night. Now Squidward's in too deep, having to turn the Krusty Krab into something it's absolutely not. If only he could just accept his failures. So Squidward begs Mr. Krabs to let him run the place for a night. Krabs agrees because, hey, rich customers mean big bucks, and the transformation begins. Squidward throws on his fancy manager hat, orders SpongeBob to be a proper waiter, and somehow enlists Patrick, who shows up all gung-ho like he's joining the army, to be the hat collector. Mr. Krabs, claiming he's a culinary genius from the SS Gourmet, takes the kitchen. What could possibly go wrong? Of course, it's a disaster. Patrick's wrestling the hat rack like it insulted his mom, and Krabs is cooking up the most unholy creations, like straight-up canned peas served still in the can, or some horror show appetizer with fly wings. And guess what? Turns out Krabs was actually the janitor on the SS Gourmet and the head chef of the SS Diarrhea. That's not even a joke. Meanwhile, Squidward hands SpongeBob this ridiculous How to Be Fancy in 20 Minutes guide, which completely melts his brain. He tells SpongeBob to clear his mind of everything except fine dining and breathing. Inside SpongeBob's head, it's chaos. Little SpongeBobs are tossing out every scrap of his memories until he's staring blankly into space. He's deleted his whole identity. He has literally lost his mind. So, Squilliam finally walks in, and shockingly, the Krusty Krab looks like a 5-star joint. SpongeBob managed to deck the place out, even if it meant tying up Patrick and Krabs in the kitchen. But when Squilliam asks SpongeBob his name, SpongeBob's brain snaps. He can't remember. He tossed it along with everything else. And what do you know? That just happens to break him. SpongeBob totally loses it, spilling food, grating people's butts, while a monster appetizer with a freaky human foot chases Patrick and Krabs out of the kitchen. The place goes from fine dining fantasy to total chaos. Squidward's forced to confess it was all a lie. Squilliam says that he too is a liar. He's actually a cashier too. Just kidding, he's messing with Squidward. He's still rich as hell, leaving Squidward crushed and Mr. Krabs playing the tiniest, saddest violin to rub salt in the wound. But hey, SpongeBob is back to normal. Maybe. Actually, I guess we really shouldn't say normal when it comes to SpongeBob. The next episode demonstrates that pretty clearly as he spirals out of control at the realization he might not be normal. This is not normal.
Squidward, how does one become normal?
So Squidward's trying to catch some sleep when SpongeBob starts running around yelling like a lunatic. Squidward, cranky as hell, tells SpongeBob he's not normal, which is true, but guess what? This totally messes with SpongeBob's head. He starts obsessing over the idea of becoming normal, because he thinks that that's what he's supposed to be. Bro, you can't work miracles. So SpongeBob heads home, digs up a cheesy self-help video called How to Be Normal for Beginners, and goes all in on this bizarre transformation. Over a few weeks, he morphs from his usual spongy, happy self into this sad, blank-looking blob. No holes, no buck teeth, no personality. The guy moves out of his funky pineapple and replaces it with a dull, generic suburban house. What is he even thinking? His buck teeth is his whole thing! At work, he turns into the world's most boring employee, trapped in a cubicle and printing out these sad, tasteless, paper-thin Krabby Patties. Mr. Krabs, thinking it's efficient, is all about it at first, until customers start hating the food, and Krabs has to fire SpongeBob. Sorry, buddy, no money, no jobby. Then Patrick runs into SpongeBob at a bus stop and tries to get him to come play, but normal SpongeBob just wants to stand around and wait for the bus like he's an NPC. Patrick's confused as hell and just leaves him there. Next, SpongeBob scrolls over to Squidward's house and starts calling him out for being abnormal. He starts picking apart Squidward's big nose, odd eyes, and even his pants, or lack thereof. He just roasts the guy. Squidward, pissed beyond belief, kicks him out for good. Finally, SpongeBob realizes being normal is making his life a living hell. He tries rewiring himself back to weird, but nothing works, so he asks Patrick for help. They try a bunch of ridiculous stuff to bring SpongeBob's oddball traits back, doing all these weird, goofy tasks until, slowly but surely, his buck teeth, holes, and freckles appear. But just when it seems like the old SpongeBob's back, he shifts right back to his dull, normal self. SpongeBob and Patrick have a full-on meltdown thinking he's permanently boring now. He's totally brainwashed himself to be the most boring creature on the ocean floor. But then, Squidward shows up, also normal as hell. Seeing Squidward like that is so freaky, it snaps SpongeBob right back to his old self. He's hugging Squidward, thanking him for saving him, and they both just stand there chatting about the weather. I don't even know if I can say that SpongeBob gets his mind back. That's just a weird ending. But hey, at least SpongeBob wasn't crying for once. Which is not something that can usually be said for SpongeBob. In this next episode, A Day Without Tears, he seems to genuinely struggle with it. SpongeBob wakes up ready to conquer the day, but immediately things go sideways. First, he stubs his toe, and suddenly he's crying like he's lost a limb. Then, when getting dressed, he rips his favorite shirt with a hanger, and it's round 2 of the waterworks. Honestly, he's kind of lost his mind before the episode's even begun. He's downing his breakfast, listening to the radio, when a sad song plays, and guess what? He's bawling his eyes out again. Meanwhile, Squidward's next door losing his mind over all the sobbing. It's exhausting. At the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob's cooking a Krabby Patty when Mr. Krabs startles him and the patty hits the floor. SpongeBob, of course, loses it, tossing the patty in the trash and going on about how life's unfair. Squidward snaps, yelling, "Krabby Patty, nothing!" Which, no shocker here, sends SpongeBob into another crying fit. Squidward just throws in the towel at this point. SpongeBob is beyond help. Later, Squidward confronts SpongeBob and drops a bombshell. This dude has cried 43 times today, and it's not even 2 p.m. He's got receipts, too, whipping out a whole video montage of SpongeBob's most pathetic crying episodes over the years. Let's not question why Squidward has been recording SpongeBob so much. Watching this cringe fest, SpongeBob finally realizes he's been an absolute mess and vows to stop. But Squidward bets he can't last until midnight tear-free. The stakes? If SpongeBob cries, he has to do Squidward's chores for a year. If he wins, Squidward's got to endure a sleepover at SpongeBob's place. I don't even know which one of those is worse. Now, Squidward's hell-bent on winning, so he follows SpongeBob around like a bad smell trying to break him down. He throws a sappy sunset at him, tragic news stories, a sad clarinet solo, and even a damn bedtime tearjerker. But SpongeBob? Ironclad. He's holding it together like a champ, fighting back tears with everything he's got. Then midnight strikes, and SpongeBob's made it. He lets loose the tears, flooding the whole damn town, which should really be impossible since they're underwater. And Squidward, he's just lost the bet of his life. Now he has to go survive a sleepover at SpongeBob's house. So, there they are, Squidward absolutely miserable, crying harder than SpongeBob ever did, while SpongeBob's sitting next to him, comforting him, both watching TV in the most horrifying, weirdly wholesome end to a ridiculous day. One of the weirdest things about SpongeBob is that he always nails a sleepover, and yet is the absolute worst person at a party. Case in point, his total mental breakdown in Party Pooper Pants.
Hey, what's that? Plan your own party, kid.
SpongeBob picks up a plan-your-own party kit at the Bargain Mart, and naturally, he's all in, deciding he's throwing the bash of the century. But SpongeBob ignores the kit's advice to keep it chill and only invite close friends. So he ends up inviting, like, half of Bikini Bottom, most of whom probably hate him. And to make things even worse, because this kit has some ominous warnings about unsupervised parties leading to disaster, SpongeBob goes nuts micromanaging everything. He makes this insane minute-by-minute schedule and forces everyone to follow it, down to planned conversations and other fun-killing nonsense. I mean, seriously, he has truly lost it if he thinks this is a good idea. Then guests start rolling in, doing their own thing, and SpongeBob completely freaks out. People are having fun. Can you believe the nerve? Fun? At a party? SpongeBob panics and hands everyone topic cards like, "Hey, stick to the script, people." So the room turns awkward as hell because he's trying to control the vibe, and now everyone's sitting there like robots. Eventually, SpongeBob loses it, storms off, and hides in the closet, probably hyperventilating over his party disaster, and thinking about how nobody is willing to just have fun responsibly. He peeks out, sees everyone actually having a blast without his direction, and just spirals. He stomps out, shuts down the music, and demands everyone sit down for story time from the funnies. But he's reading yesterday's funnies, and that's just not okay. So off he goes to get today's paper. While he's out, the party erupts into actual fun again. SpongeBob comes back, but oops, he locked himself out. Now the guests are partying it up inside, and poor SpongeBob's losing his damn mind on the lawn, trying everything to break in. At one point, even dressing like a bunny and wielding a pickaxe. I promise you he has a reason to do that, but also it fits with him going psycho in this episode. Then the cops show up, see a manic SpongeBob trying to bust down his own door and nearly arrest him. After he babbles his way out, they still haul him off for not inviting them. So SpongeBob misses the entire party, spends the night in lockup, and returns in the morning all mopey, thinking his party flopped. Then Patrick stops by and drops the bomb. "Dude, that was the best party ever!" And suddenly, SpongeBob's riding high, realizing parties don't need stupid schedules. Or him, but he apparently doesn't think about that part. He even spots Gary rocking a lampshade and realizes everyone, even his snail, had the time of their lives. He ends the night satisfied, finally understanding what makes a real party. Again, he's completely ignored the fact that, everyone had fun because he wasn't there. Although, at least in this case, he was just outside. Then some people just straight up want him dead. And by some, I mean Mrs. Puff and Mrs. Puff alone. It's Demolition Doofus.
Look out, extra credit. Here I come.
Yes, extra credit.
So SpongeBob's taking his driver's test, but of course he's doing his usual SpongeBob thing, ramming into the same two cars over and over. Every single time he crashes, Mrs. Puff blows up like a balloon. Eventually she inflates so much she rockets them into the air and they end up crashing right into the freaking lighthouse. The crash leaves Mrs. Puff totally wrecked, and she's basically doomed to a lifetime of suffering. Although, to be fair, she was SpongeBob's driving tutor, so I think she was kinda screwed either way. Fast forward to the hospital where the doc drops the bombshell. Mrs. Puff's inflation sack is done for. No more puffing up for her. SpongeBob tries to make some joke about her being crippled, which naturally pisses her off to no end. What the hell was he even thinking making a joke like that? She's so livid she goes full-on attack mode, grabbing his nose, threatening him, and making him apologize until they have to sedate her. And SpongeBob? They have to knock him out too because he's yammering on like he has zero self-awareness. The doc's like, everyone here needs a damn nap. So do I, man. I have to listen to him for hours making these videos. Then it gets worse. SpongeBob shows up again with flowers, like a whole field of them, completely ignoring that she's allergic. He shoves her into a wheelchair and takes her on a chaotic hospital joyride. It's just one crazy decision after another. Along the way, they run into a gang of buff demolition derby dudes on stretchers looking ready to throw down in the hospital. Mrs. Puff spots them, has this psychotic vision of them demolishing SpongeBob into oblivion, and starts cackling like a maniac. Oh, extra credit time! Yeah, your last extra credit, bro. So Mrs. Puff, still hell-bent on getting this kid annihilated, introduces SpongeBob to the derby manager, Captain Lutefisk, who thinks SpongeBob's a perfect punching bag and dubs him Le Squish. They slap a sock on his head and he's in the derby without a clue what's going on. The derby cars come at him, but somehow SpongeBob just dumb lucks his way out of every attack, either hitting everyone by accident or dodging until they're all wrecked. And he has a great time doing it, too! Mrs. Puff finally snaps and grabs a monster truck, going full rage mode as she tries to mow SpongeBob down. She chases him all over the place, but the little guy just keeps dodging her. Eventually, their insane chase smashes them right back into boating school, and, in one final twist, Mrs. Puff miraculously puffs up one last time. But it's too late. The whole building collapses on top of them both. Well, at least he enjoyed himself, I guess. It's nice to have a moment of joy during a total mental collapse, but a giant stone statue of yourself is even better. SpongeBob really hits rock bottom in our final episode on the list, Spongehenge.
Neptune stirred up quite a gale tonight. He must be mad about something.
That's silly. Everyone knows Poseidon is ruler of the undersea.
The episode starts with this insane windstorm whipping through Bikini Bottom. Some unlucky guy's leftovers get yanked out of his hand, fly straight through SpongeBob's bedroom window, and smack him in the face. As SpongeBob leans out the window to check out the wind, it blows through his sponge holes and makes music, which is one of the weirdest sentences I've ever said. Suddenly, it's like he's a one-man jellyfish rave. They swarm around him, totally hooked on his weird-ass wind melody. They can't get enough of his magic wind holes. By the next day, poor SpongeBob can't even walk out of his door without these jellyfish all over him, just dying for more music. He tries heading to the Krusty Krab, but they're chasing him like he's got their next fix. Mr. Krabs has to haul him in on a fishing rod just to get him inside and make some money. But even then, the windows blast open and the wind plays through SpongeBob again. Well, now the jellyfish lose their minds. SpongeBob tries hiding out in Patrick's place, thinking he'll finally get a breather. Nope. One jellyfish sneaks in and zaps Patrick, who throws SpongeBob out like it's his fault. Which it is, but I mean, he didn't choose to have these magic music holes. The poor guy has nowhere left to go, so he finds himself in a cave and holes up there like a lunatic hermit. He starts going full castaway, building a rock version of himself to keep him company. This rock Spongebob is his new best friend, and they talk over tea while Spongebob goes completely stir-crazy. He rambles on about how his own frigging holes are attracting these jellyfish. And now, yes, he has truly, truly lost his marbles. But then, SpongeBob gets the genius idea. Maybe the stone SpongeBob can play the music instead. But when he drags the statue out, the jellyfish absolutely hate it and sting him all over again. That's when SpongeBob decides, all right, fine, let's go big. He builds these massive stone versions of himself, sets them up in a circle, full Stonehenge style. The wind blows through their holes and finally cranks out music the jellyfish love. I mean, you have to chalk that up as a victory, right? Wrong. SpongeBob is so stoked to finally get back to work away from the jellyfish, but when he finally makes it, the Krusty Krab's a sinking abandoned wreck with nobody around anywhere. SpongeBob's wasted his entire life in that cave. He's sobbing in despair and the screen fades. So, a happy ending for everyone. SpongeBob's lost his mind and his life. Fast forward 3,000 years, now aliens are visiting these Spongehenge ruins, trying to piece together why these statues even exist. All they know is the statues' weird tunes still bring the jellyfish running. Yeah, still no happy ending. It's bleak as hell, man!